Today we're going to talk about solving fractions with tricky fraction problems. Now make sure you have this piece of paper sitting in front of you because we're going to go over this together. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight my title. And I call these tricky fraction problems because I usually have tricks to helping me solve them. So I have three different types of tricky problems. The first tricky problem is when I have to distribute a fraction. So remember when I'm solving equations, I always want to distribute before I get rid of fractions. So when I have to distribute a fraction, if you look, I would have to distribute 1/2 to both of those things, and I don't want to have to do that. So how I prevent this from happening is I do what's called the over 1 trick. So I'm going to go ahead and do the over 1 trick. So when I have to distribute a fraction, I'm going to do the over 1 trick. So notice this problem, if I draw my line through my equal sign, I have to distribute a fraction, so I'm going to do the over 1 trick. So now I'm going to multiply the top with the top, and I'm going to multiply the bottom with the bottom. So if I multiply the top with the top, 1 times 3x is 3x, and 1 times -2 is -2, all over bottom times the bottom, 2 times 1 is 2, and that equals 5. So now that I've distributed, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to multiply both sides by the denominator to eliminate my fractions. So my denominator is 2, so I'm going to multiply this side by 2 and that side by 2. And I'm only multiplying this whole term by 2 because that's one whole term. So these 2's cancel out, and I'm left with 3x minus 2 equals 5 times 2, which is 10. So now if I go through and I look at this problem, I'm going to solve for x just like before. I'm going to add 2 on both sides. So I have 3x equals 2 plus 10 is 12. And then I'm going to divide by 3. So if I write my answer, I have x equals 4 up here. Probably should have zoomed in a little bit, but that's okay. So now if I go through and I erase, and I want to check 4, if I want to check 4, just so I show you how I check, I would do 1/2 times 3 times 4 minus 2 equals 5. So if I follow PEMDAS, 3 times 4 is 12. 12 minus 2 is 10. And 1/2 of 10 is, sure enough, 5. So it works. Okay? So if I go ahead and I do example 2, since the first step I have to do is distribute, and notice I'm distributing a fraction, I have to do my over 1 trick. So I'm going to do over 1 with my parentheses. I'm now going to multiply the top with the top, so I'm going to distribute -2. So -2 times 3x is -6x. Does not look like a 6. Let's try again. -6x. And -2 times 4 is -8. All over the bottom times the bottom. 3 times 1 is 3. And that equals 1, because that's what the right side equals. So step 2 tells me to get rid of fractions. How I get rid of fractions is I multiply both sides by the denominator, which is 3. So these 3's are going to cancel out. I'm left with -6x minus 8 equals 1 times 3, which is 3. Notice I'm not multiplying the top by 3 because it's all over 3. So the the denominator causes them to cancel out, which makes it nicer. So now I want to go back and solve just like before. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides. So I have -6x equals 3 plus 8 is 11. Divide by -6 on both sides. So then I'm going to go over to my calculator and I'm going to do 11 divided by -6, hit enter, and I'm going to do math, enter, enter, and I get -11 over 6. So x equals -11 over 6. Friendly piece of advice, notice here how your negative sign is on the side. Remember, when anything is ever on the side of a fraction, he really belongs on top. So even if I have a negative on the denominator, you really want to make sure you put it also on the top. Okay? So if we go ahead, that's trick number 1. I'm going to zoom in here so I have a little more space. And let's talk about trick number 2. number 2, that's when I'm distributing to a fraction. Okay? So if I look at this example, number 1, I know I have to distribute. How come? Well, because I have parentheses. So I know I can do 2 times y, which is 2y. What about 2 times 1/3? Can you do 2 times 1/3? Hopefully you can, but maybe somebody can't, right? So you have a couple of options. So you can do this in your calculator. You can do 2 times and then do alpha y equals enter, 1 down arrow 3 and hit enter. You get 2/3. So plus 2/3. That's one way to do it. Or I can just always take my outside number, always gets multiplied with the number on top. So 2 times 1 is 2, and then over 3. Alright, so now if I look at this, my next step says I have to get rid of fractions. So how I'm going to get rid of fractions, I'm going to multiply everything by the denominator, which is 3. So 2 times 3, 3 times 2y is 6y. And 3 times 2 over 3, my 3's crossed out, I'm left with plus 2. And then 7 times 3 is 21. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep solving. I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides. So I have 6y equals 21 minus 2, which is 19. And then I'm going to divide by 6 on both sides. So now I'm going to type in 19 divided by 6, hit enter, math, enter, enter. I get 19 over 6. So y is 19 over 6. Okay? So if, I used the wrong thing. So now I'm going to go ahead and look at example 2. I'm going to do the same thing. So first step is I have to distribute. Now I know I have parentheses. So 5 times 3a is 15a. And then 5 times negative 1/4. So I can do 5 times negative 1 over 4 and hit enter. I get negative 5/4. So that's going to be minus 5 over 4 equals 2. Or I could have done outside number times the top. So 5 times 1 is 5 over 4. So now what do I want to do? Well, I want to get rid of fractions. How do I get rid of fractions? Well, I'm going to multiply everything in this problem by 4. So 15a times 4, well, that's 60a. And over here, my 4's cancel out, I'm left with minus 5. And 2 times 4 is 8. So now I'm just going to go back and I'm going to solve it. So I'm going to add 5 first. So I have 60a equals 8 plus 5 is 13. And then I'm going to divide by 60. So if I type in my calculator, 13 divided by 60, math, enter, enter, I get 13 over 60. So a equals 13 over 60. And I'm done. So at the bottom of this, the next two are practice problems. So I want you to try these 2 practice problems. I don't know how to erase that. It'd be helpful if I knew how to, wouldn't it? So I want you to try practice 1, and I want you to try practice 2. I want you to pause this video and try these on your own, and then when you finish, I want you to unpause the video and I'll go over them. So if I look at practice number 1, I have to distribute a fraction. So how do I distribute a fraction? I do the over 1 trick. So I'm going to distribute the top with the top. So 2 times 3a is 6a. And 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. All over the bottom times the bottom, 3 times 1 is 3. And that equals 5. I'm now going to get rid of fractions by multiplying both sides by the denominator. The denominator is 3. So these cancel out. I'm left with 6a minus 8 equals 5 times 3 is 15. I'm now going to add 8 to both sides. So I have 6a equals 23, and I'm going to divide by 6 on both sides, and a is 23 over 6. So now I'm going to go over and I'm going to look at example 2. Example 2, I know I have to distribute because I have parentheses. So 5 times 2b, well, that's 10b. And 5 times negative 1/3, well, I just take that number and multiply it by the top. So 5 times 1 is 5, so that's minus 5 over 3 equals 3. If I didn't know that, I could have typed it in my calculator. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of fractions, and I multiply everything by the denominator. So 3 times 10b is 30b. These 3's cancel out, and this is minus 5. And 3 times 3 is 9. I'm now going to add 5 to both sides. So I have 30b equals 9 plus 5 is 14. I'm going to divide by 30 on both sides. So I'm then in my calculator going to do 14 divided by 30. And I'm going to hit math, enter, enter. And I get b equals 7 over 15. Okay, so hopefully you're doing okay with the first two tricks. We have one last trick to talk about. I want you to take a preview at these problems. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight mine. Okay. And if I look at these problems, what's scary about these problems? You're telling me that the denominators are different, right? So when you have a fraction equals a fraction, anybody know how I'd solve a problem like this? You've solved them before. How you would solve them is all you do is cross multiply. Okay? Your teachers in previous classes call them the butterfly. It doesn't matter which butterfly you do first. I don't personally draw the butterflies because I think it's hard to see. I just kind of draw X's. So X times 7 is 7X. And 5 times 6, that equals 30. So I do one diagonal equals the other diagonal. I'm now going to solve for X by dividing by 7. So 30 divided by 7. Math, enter, enter. I get 30 over 7. Okay. If I come over and I look at example 2, I know I have to cross multiply because it's fraction equals fraction. If it was fraction plus a number equals fraction, I cannot cross multiply. I can only cross multiply when it's fraction equals sign fraction. So when cross multiply, it doesn't matter which diagonal you do first. Let's do that one. 15 times 2 is 30 equals y times 3 is 3y. So now I'm going to solve for y by dividing by 3. So y equals 10. Let's go over and let's look at the last example. Notice the last example, if I do 5 times x, I know I have to cross multiply first off because it's fraction equals fraction. So 5 times x is 5x. And then I have to do 2 times 2x plus 3. So is this 2 being multiplied to 2x? Is this 2 being multiplied to 3? Or is this 2 being multiplied to both? Being multiplied to both. So 2 times 2x is 4x. And 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, so notice I have variables on opposite sides. So I have to get my variables on one side. So I'm going to move 4x by taking the opposite, which is negative 4x. So now 5x minus 4x, that's just x. X equals 6. Hey, I'm done. Okay? So if you go ahead and you notice that there are 3 practice problems down below, I want you to try those 3 practice problems, and then I want you to so you're going to pause the video, you're going to do those 3 problems, and then you're going to unpause the video, and then you're going to check your answers. If you need help, I will go through them as well to help you out, but I recommend that you try doing them on your own first. So if I look at number 1, I have to distribute a fraction, which means I have to do the over 1 trick. So top times top, 3 times 2y is 6y, 3 times negative 1 is negative 3, all over 4 times 1 is 4, and that equals 4. Okay, from here I got to get rid of fractions, so I'm going to multiply both sides by the denominator, which is 4. So I'm left with 6y minus 3 equals 16, because 4 times 4 is 16. I'm now going to add 3 to both sides. So I have 6y equals 19 and divide by 6. So y is 19 over 6. If I look at number 2, I have to cross multiply because it's fraction equals fraction. So I do the easy diagonal first if one looks more complicated. So 5 times x is 5x. And then I have to take 3 times 3x and 3 times 1. So 3 times 3x is 9x. And 3 times 1 is 3. So now I have to subtract my x's to get them on one side. So if I subtract 9x, I'm going to get negative 4x equals 3. So divide by negative 4. So x equals negative 3 over 4. If you have subtracted 5x, if I just go over and show you how I would do that. If I have subtracted 5x, I have 0 equals 4x plus 3. Notice it's 0 because nothing's left over here. So now I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides. So I have negative 3 equals 4x. Divide by 4. Sure enough, x is negative 3. Okay? So if I go over and I do the last one, I know I have to distribute because I have parentheses. So 2 times 3a is 6a. And 2 times 2/5, well, 2 times 2 is 4, so that's 4/5. That just equals 1. So now I'm going to multiply everything by 5. So I'm left with 30a plus, my 5's cancel out, 4. 1 times 5 is 5. Subtract 4 on both sides, so I have 30a equals 1. I'm now going to divide by 30. So a equals 1 divided by 30. Math, enter, enter. Is still 1 over 30. So hopefully you're okay with these tricky fraction problems. If you go ahead and you flip your paper, let's very briefly talk about word problems. People see word problems and they get scared. However, word problems are usually the easiest problems on a test because we understand that you get the most scared. Okay? So when I'm solving word problems, I have 5 steps that I like to follow. Okay? Step 1 is I like to obviously read the problem and cross out useless information. They like to make word problems really long because they like to try to scare you. So there's always usually useless information in the problem. Okay, but not always if the problem's not long. Step 2, I'm going to define my variables. And how I define my variables is the info I know nothing about gets X. So the information that I know nothing about is the one that gets the variable. Step 3 is I'm going to set up the equation. Step 4, I'm going to solve. And step 5, I'm going to write a sentence to ensure answer is logical. If you were solving a problem and you were answering how old somebody was, and you solved for X and you got negative 4, is it logical to say somebody is negative 4 years old? No. So that's why we always write a sentence to help our brains. So if I look at some of these examples, it says, On an algebra test, the highest grade was 42 points higher than the lowest grade. The sum of the two grades was 132. Find the lowest grade. So I don't really have any useless information in this problem because this word problem is not very long. So now I have to go through step 2, which is to define my variables. What am I talking about in this problem? I'm talking about the highest grade, and I'm talking about the lowest grade, right? And in my highest grade, what does it tell me about my highest grade? It tells me my highest grade is 42 points higher than my lowest grade, okay? What does this problem tell you about the lowest grade? Well, it tells me nothing. So the one that I know nothing about gets the X. So now how do I turn the highest grade into relationships with X? It says the highest grade was 42 points higher than the lowest grade. So higher than probably just means plus. And remember the word than switches it. So it's going to be X plus 42. So now it says the sum of the two grades was 138. So sum means add. So I'm going to take the highest, which is X plus 42. And I'm going to take the lowest, which is X, and I'm going to add them together. And that's going to equal 138. So now I'm going to draw my slashes and solve. X and X make 2X. So now I'm going to subtract 42 on both sides. So I have 138 minus 42. And I have 96. So I have 2x equals 96. And divide by 2. So if I divide by 2, I do 96 divided by 2. It's not 6, how about 2? I get x equals 48. So if x is 48, is x the lowest grade or the highest grade? Well, notice it's the lowest grade. So if I write a sentence to make sure it's logical, the lowest grade is 48 points. And I always end with a sentence to ensure that it's logical. So let's go ahead and let's look at the next one. In a given amount of time, Jamie drove twice as far as Rhonda. Altogether, they drove 90 miles. Find the number of miles driven by each. So this problem is talking about who? It's talking about Jamie, and it's talking about Rhonda. All right, so it says Jamie drove twice as far as Rhonda. So I know something about Jamie. What about Rhonda? Do I know anything about Rhonda? I don't. So Rhonda gets an X. So now I have to take what I know about Jamie, and I have to use it in terms of X. Jamie drove twice as far as Rhonda, so 2X. And it says all together, so that means add, they drove 90 miles. So if I add those two together, 2X plus X, it's got to equal 90. So let's solve. 2X and X make 3X. And then I want to divide by 3. So X equals 30. So let's go back to what the problem's asking. It says find the number of miles driven by each. So X represents Rhonda. So Rhonda drove 30 miles. And Jamie drove 2 times X. So 2 times 30, 60 miles. Okay? So I want you to pause this video, and I want you to try example 3 and example 4 on your own. When you finish example 3 and example 4, you can unpause the video and fast forward to the answer, or you can have me explain it. So the width of the rectangular map is 15 inches, and the perimeter is 50 inches. Find the width. So I'm going to draw a picture, and it says my rectangle is 15, so that's my length. And it says find the width. So that's X and that's X. It says the perimeter is 50. So how do I find the perimeter? Well, I add up all the sides. So 15 plus X plus 15 plus X has to equal 50. So 30 on both sides. I get 2x equals 20. Divide by 2. So x equals 10. So that means the width is 10 inches. And if I do the last one, it says Julia was signing up for ballet classes. To sign up, there was a $150 registration fee, plus an additional $22 a class. If Julia spends $436, how many classes did she sign up for? So when Julia walked into the ballet studio, she had to pay $150. And then she had to pay in addition $22 for each class. Do I know how many classes she took? No, so that gets an X. How much money did she spend? $436. So I'm going to subtract 150 on both sides. So I have 22x equals 436 minus 150. I get 286. And I'm going to divide by 22 on both sides. So divide by 22. I get 13. My writing, come on. 13. So Julia paid